I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD, and today we're talking about seasonal allergies since we recently finished up a discussion about food allergies. So I'd like to explain what the allergic cascade is, and then we will understand why the treatments are what they are. So basically an environmental tidbit may be floating around through the air, and it may get to our nasal mucosa, which will signal the plasma cells or B cells to take their IgE, get that antigen or particle, and display it or present it or take it to the mast cell. And the mast cell will, what's called degranulate, it will release its contents, which is histamine, and a vasodilating approach will happen to release the histamine into the tissue. Now, that histamine release and vasodilation is to actually attract other white blood cells to the area to mount an attack to eliminate the invader. So this will explain why some of the medical approaches do what they do. So of course I'll start with the medical approaches since I am a physician, albeit I am integrative. So the first line of medication to help with the environmental allergies are very obviously the antihistamines. So they will systemically, so you take a medication, they will systemically block that release or block the histamine that has been released. Now, we need to all be mindful of the types of side effects that go along with that, which is mouth dryness, mucosal dryness, dry cough, mental fogginess, and even to a degree, an intolerance to that, to the point it may actually upset the stomach. So in walks the next line of medications, which are the steroids. Now there are the inhaled variations, which you can spray up the nose if you're noticing a nasal related complaint, or we may actually have those for the eyes if you have eye complaints. And you certainly may have the inhaled steroids to help take care of the chest-related complaints and the potential cough that may go hand in hand with it. Then, of course, we may actually have the systemic steroids, and this is very classically prednisone. So how the steroid works is blocking down the arachidonic pathway that will yield some inflammatory cytokines. Now, arachidonic acid is an omega-6, which is quite inflammatory and quite high in our American diet and the obesity phenomenon. So more about that later. Then we actually have leukotriene blockers, and one of the classic medications for that is Singulair. Then we have more aggressive immune modulators such as Xolair. Now, the next line of defense when some of those medications aren't working is something called desensitization shots. And there may be plenty of you out in the audience that have needed allergy shots when all else has been failing. So it is actually quite a homeopathic style of medication or medical approach in which you are putting low dose of escalating higher doses of those particular agents that you are allergic to, and that is in hopes that you are desensitizing the cells to not recognize this as a foreigner and or convert it over into an IgG pathway, which is less toxic, moreover than an IgE pathway, which is releasing that histamine. Then, of course, medically, there may just simply be some symptom relief, such as codeine cough syrup, eye itching medications, skin-related preps with aloe vera and topical steroids and topical immune modulators to quiet down the skin manifestations, or even epinephrine or epinephrine sprays to quiet down the phenomenon. So now we are going to move on to the natural remedies, which of course is something that I will integrate into the patient's plan. And sometimes this may be before any of those medical approaches that we just discussed. So here's the most obvious one. One natural relief is to avoid those things that will aggravate you. But of course, we live in a world that we are coming and going, and we may not be able to avoid those particular substances that are either airborne or environmental. Believe it or not, please believe it, exercise has quite an anti-inflammatory effect, especially on the sinuses. Now, another fabulous approach would be to consider local honey or local bee pollen. And if you can really think your way through this, becomes quite obvious. If you are allergic to some of the trees or grasses or some of the plant life that surrounds you, those bees are pollinating and getting around those pollens and particulates and creating a honey source from that. And ingesting the honey will actually be a natural way to desensitize yourself from those substances. Now, this is another easy one. Saline rinses with a Neti-pot may keep some of the encrusting and the mucosal debris away from the sinus drainage points. Now, probiotics are in an effort to help you really create a nice, robust, varied immune system. Now, water, especially drinking lots and lots and lots of water, not only will offset some of the side effects from the antihistamine and the steroid family, but it will actually sometimes water down some of the antibodies that are floating around in the bloodstream. I cannot go without mentioning some of the herbal preps which work very nicely, and some of them are stinging nettle, garlic and onion. Now, garlic and onion are actually mostly getting their health benefits from the quercetin that is the active ingredient that behaves as an antihistamine. So sometimes you can actually get quercetin in a capsule or a pill formulation. Rosemary has quite a great antihistamine effect. Turmeric, which is an anti-inflammatory effect. Butterbur, bromelain, which actually is an enzyme that comes from pineapple. N-acetylcysteine, which aids in some of the mucus and mucosal thickening to make it less thick. And then we have our trusty vitamin C, which at higher doses becomes a great anti-inflammatory, and vitamin D, which is an immune modulator. So there are great results from the acupuncture community and acupressure, which is actually targeting the end organ response to the allergic trigger. Now, here in Colorado Springs, we have some great practitioners with quite sophisticated energy practices, including these techniques, that are completely eliminating or actually reducing the allergic cascade non-invasively. We really need to capitalize on a good diet, which is nearly one of the treatments for nearly every single health condition we have been discussing thus far, and this is no exception. We need to have a low inflammatory diet. So I will say a high sugary, processed, high carbohydrate, high grain food, or high diet in those items will not only raise the insulin, it will raise the cortisol that goes with it. And then our cells become quite bombarded with this stress hormone, and the cells can actually get rendered cortisol resistant. And then you would need higher and higher steroids to work for the targeted inflammatory response that you were going after. So we're going to go back to the high intake of improper fats and fried foods will actually give more of a high omega-6 and omega-9 dietary intake, which is that arachidonic acid we were talking about that does yield those inflammatory cytokines and prostaglandins in the first place. So if we can make some of those avoidances with our food intake, then we will not have a pro-inflammatory, pro-cytokine, pro-prostaglandin based inflammatory system just waiting for any small little particulate to be considered an invader because it's just waiting to go on the attack. So a quick note, there are true allergies, which we just talked about. But then there is something called the irritant phenomenon. And the easiest examples I have for this are either grass particulates after you've been mowing the grass, or cigarette smoke, or a smoke-filled air atmosphere with some of the forest fires. And those particular particulates are quite irritating to the nasal mucosa, to the respiratory mucosa, and it will almost mechanically release the histamine from the mast cells, and many times is bypassing the IgE phenomenon, but the whole process is the same as far as the histamine release, the vasodilation, and the absolute collapse of the immune system, creating those symptoms. So I know this was a lot we went over. There is a lot of chemistry involved, there is some energy involved, and there is a lot of dietary and lifestyle issues that are involved. We have plenty of interplay between our environment and our human existence within that environment. Please submit any questions that you have. Subscribe to my channel below. Let me know some of your allergic issues and we can have a chat and a dialogue. And until we meet again, be well.